Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us behind the shield. I'm Alex Earhart. I've worked at Infusion Points for going on 8 years now. And a little bit of background is I actually started part-time here, worked in the SOC, worked weekends, night shifts, all the shifts no one wants to work, holidays, and worked my way up to being an engineer. And I am joined with Nicholas Whitley. So tell us a little about yourself, Nick.
I'm Nicholas Whitley. I'm a senior security engineer with Infusion Points. I've been with Infusion Points for about 4 years now. Same as Alex, started in the SOC and worked my way up through there, and now I'm on Alex's team.
So, Nick, why AI? Why now?
Yeah, so this time a year or two ago, I would say organizations were approaching AI, deciding should we use it, should we not. Today, that's not really a question anymore. Now it's we've got to use AI. How do we do it? Out in the wild, we've already seen threat actors using LLMs to exploit 0 days, find 0 days, accelerate the speed of their attacks. And so, with threat actors having that advantage, being able to increase their attacks at scale, the blue team, the defense, is going to have to adopt that and do the same.
Very cool. Very cool. So, how much do you think this would benefit not only the team but the individual analysts themselves?
Benefits them a lot. Talking with our guys in the SOC, one of the big things they talk about a lot is alert fatigue. Having to go through potentially thousands of alerts a day can be cumbersome. So having sort of a tier one agent that does that for them really helps accelerate their workflow.
So you said accelerate the workflow. So how much have you done any math or anything on how much time we're saving by using an AI analyst versus having a human analyst reading and making tickets for everything?
So talking with the SOC guys and also just capturing metrics on our side with the agent we use in our X operations monitoring service. Our analyst would say, alerts could take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to triage, and then you potentially have to escalate it if it's a true positive, whereas the agent can do it within seconds.
It's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, as you know, much as anybody, that's a big gap. And attackers only can take a few minutes to do something. So if you're having to spend 5 or so minutes making a ticket down to seconds, that's quicker response time. So
Yep. These days, when a threat actor gets in, it's only they can escalate their privileges and drop a payload within minutes.
Cool. So what exactly? I hear the term agentic AI being thrown around. What does that mean, man?
So with the Agentic SOC analyst we're using in our X operations monitoring service, it's essentially a agentic workflow. So it's not just one agent, even though from the front end, from someone using the platform their side, it's like they're talking to one agent. It's actually a series of agents joined together in a flow.
So I guess the word agentic just correlates to multiple agents doing different specific workloads.
Yep. Cool. Each agent has its own, prompt, own instruction set, own tools it can use, and together they work just like a normal SOC team would.
Cool. So if you have multiple agents, is that a lot harder to engineer, or is that a lot harder solution to just bring to the table, or is it just as simple as it sounds?
I would say doing multiple actually makes it easier. If you have a traditional SOC and you throw one analyst in and say, hey, do everything, they're going to get overwhelmed. It's going to be hard to manage that workload. Whereas having, multiple SOC analysts, that's the same as having multiple agents. Some can be dedicated to certain things, have their own expertise in different areas, and work together as one team.
So the expertise is like they each have their own knowledge base.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess that makes sense. You think about it, it's kind of like just a team in general. Like you might be the expert on one thing, I might be the expert on another.
Yep.
But yeah, cool. So how do we? My biggest concern with AI for a while has been, how do you trust what it's giving back to you, especially if you're automating like a SOC, because it's got to be pretty reliable. If it's marking stuff as false positives, it doesn't need to be. That's not ideal, not good for anybody. So how are we combating that?
Yeah. So there's a phrase that people often use, the human in the loop. So not just trusting it 100% of the time at face value, still having a team of human analysts in the loop monitoring its decisions. Also, before implementing into production, we have test workloads. We feed it alerts that we've received that analysts have triaged in the past.
Mm.
We feed it those alerts, see how it analyzes them, see how it triages and compares it, and compare it to past notes from real analysts to see how they compare what it did that the analyst wouldn't have done, or what it, didn't do that the analyst would have done.
Mm. Is there any kind of like human element when it comes to giving it new information, or can anyone just get in and like, okay, this is a false positive now? Because like, what if someone makes a mistake? Because I used to work in the SOC. I mean, humans make mistakes. That's the whole
Yep.
whole thing.
Yep.
So,
So when building it out, one thing we were really worried about was data poisoning.
hmm
So let's say you have a alert come in that gets ticketed. A SOC analyst or someone in the environment notes on the ticket, this is a false positive, authorized activity, can be disregarded. That's great. For efficiency, the agent can learn off of that, use that in the future so it doesn't unnecessarily alert and notify personnel. But at the same time, someone with it doesn't even have to be malicious intention. It could be
hmm
unintentionally put the wrong information. That person who commented on the ticket that this is authorized may have just been misinformed.
yeah,
Or they could be intentionally trying to exploit the agent and put that just so the agent would think it's fine.
yeah. Like if
Um,
someone got in the environment, somehow figured out we're using this, and then they're like, okay, I'm about to do X, Y, Z, so I'm
mhm.
gonna go tell this thing that X, Y, Z is okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Two points to that. Um, you know, on one hand, that's no different than a traditional environment.
hmm
If someone gets access to your SIEM or EDR, and they have malicious intent, they could easily go in, disable some rules,
hmm
disable agents that are running on
Yep.
endpoints, things of that nature. But also, one way we've further addressed that is within our X operations solution. You can manage permissions of users, and so you can grant certain users essentially the AI agent admin.
Okay.
And so when they comment on tickets, the agent actually absorbs that input and uses it to learn off of. Whereas, base users, read only users, their comments aren't regarded by the
Okay.
agent.
So it's pretty much peer reviewing before it goes into production.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
Cool. Cool. So, what is the risks of using this AI model? Is there any, or is it net positive all around?
So, like we mentioned, there's the potential for data poisoning, trying to tell the agent, don't alert on this, and you have
hmm
malicious intent and just want to do that in the environment and go unseen. That is a risk. However, that's a risk that's present. As I said, in current solutions, you can put exclusion rules in current SIEM tools so your activity isn't alerted on. Um, so, while a risk, that is a risk that already exists, in today's landscape.
Yeah, I had another question. So, if you mentioned there's kind of like an approver list or some kind of peer review to get stuff like that added to the knowledge base, but does it do any kind of learning on its own? Like, will it make its own decisions, or does it have to only be peer reviewed stuff that gets allowed into the knowledge base?
So, I guess that's kind of where you have to start thinking about how to use AI correctly.
hmm
Because if when you build this workflow out, you're just putting in a bunch of if then statements,
hmm
it's no different than a SOAR tool where you're telling it, if
hmm
I receive this alert, take these actions in the environment. And so, whereas SOAR executes actions based on, human made rules,
hmm
the agentic AI is actually making those decisions.
Okay.
So, in that agentic workflow I talked about, you have agents that go out to the internet and look up, real time threat intel,
hmm
search IOCs. So, let's say we get a low level alert for, brute force activity. External appliances are always getting brute forced. It may notify or may ticket that as a lower priority alert. However, if it sees that the IP associated is tied to a threat group, it might elevate that to a medium or a high severity alert.
Cool. Do you think it's gonna filter out a lot of the noise over time? You think it's gonna be smart enough to learn all that? Because I know a lot of the you mentioned earlier about alert fatigue. We worked in the SOC for years, but that was one of the big things. Is like, oh, I see X alert for X customer. This happens once a week, twice a week, every day, every hour, whatever the cadence might be. You're kind of like, oh, you kind of get numb to it.
Hmm.
You're like, oh, this happens. It's nothing big deal. So
Yeah.
you stop doing the analysis you probably need to do.
Yeah.
So you think it's gonna get rid of all that, not garbage, but just noise that would bog down the analyst and just kind of give it true alerts that really need someone to dig into?
Yep. So I know we've seen it from our time in the stock, and I've also, read stats that, some stocks say that over 90% of their
Mm-hmm.
alerts are just noise and are disregarded.
Mm-hmm.
So, as the AI agent or agentic flow learns, evolves, it can hopefully work to filter out that noise. You mentioned what risks are associated with this.
Mm-hmm.
That's one potential risk. Is it's great if it can filter out some noise, make things easier on our human analyst. However, what if it filters out the wrong
Yeah.
things? And that's a risk. However, I've slowly started to treat AI the way I would talking with you or another coworker.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to make mistakes. All you can do is show them why they made that mistake, how
Yeah.
it was a mistake, and teach them how to address that in the future so it doesn't happen
Yeah,
again.
because I know when the SOC hits us up and like, hey, we're getting blown up with, some guard duty alert or whatever it is. That's the balance we have to do. So
Mhm.
you're helping us out too from the engineering side. Because if it's doing that tuning for us, then that's one less thing me and you have to do.
Yep.
And it also benefits the SOC guys. So it's cool.
Yep.
So that kind of leads into the next topic we're going to cover is, it helps us, it helps the SOC. So does that kind of change the roles a little bit around here or?
Yeah. So with this, agentic flow in our X operations service, it's really kind of eliminated the need for our human analysts to operate at a tier one level.
Mm-hmm.
There's no longer anyone just sitting, staring at a scene page, refreshing every 5 minutes, waiting for a new alert,
Mm-hmm.
triaging it, closing it out as a false positive. The agentic workflow really takes it from beginning to end of the tier one process. It ingests the alert, analyzes the activity, pulls out relevant information like the user involved, the associated IP. It reaches out to the SIEM, EDR, whatever tools you have,
Mm-hmm.
investigates those um, users' IPs, and does all the triage it needs. Addresses this situation at a whole. Actually, within this flow, we have a separate review agent. So once all the agents are done doing everything,
Okay.
there's one review agent that looks over all of it, makes sure it makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
and then it also makes the decision of what action to take next. Do I close this alert as a false positive? Do I leave it open but not ticket it and reach out to a human for further review,
Mm-hmm.
or do I go ahead and make the decision based on severity that hey, this needs to be ticketed and someone needs to be notified?
How is it notifying? Is it email? Is
Um,
it how's it
so
doing it?
once an alert's received and it determines a human needs to take a look, the agentic workflow can submit a ticket for it. So it
Mm-hmm.
gathers relevant bits of evidence, generates a summary of the alert, pulls any raw logs from various tools it checked, and dumps that all into a ticket for someone to view.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be integrated with email, your communication platform, Teams,
Yeah.
Slack, and notify personnel that way.
Cool. So it's basically like you hired a new analyst. It's just 24/7 analyst.
Yep.
Essentially.
Yep, and it's also when it creates those tickets, it looks at your org, looks at your structure, what teams you have, whether you have a security operations team, IT team, and based on the type of alert, let's say it's a disk space alert on a
Mm-hmm.
server, a disk gets full. It may think, okay, that's not a security issue, but it needs to go to an operations team. And so
Mm-hmm.
rather than assigning it to security, it'll assign it to
Cool.
operations and only notify that personnel.
Yeah, it's like we have all those SOPs. Might as well let it do it for us.
Yep.
Cool. You mentioned all the actions it's going to take in this scenario here. One of the big things we do with the SOC is we have to keep pretty much an audit log of everything. Keep
Mhm.
track of the tickets. Keep track of even the user activity in the SIM. They ran this query, that query. Is that same type of logging in the Agentic AI flow?
Yeah. So whenever the alerts come into the console, there's an evidence section that shows, everything that the agentic flow did during its process of investigating the alert. That's also where it says if it made a ticket or not. And back to the permissions I talked about earlier that you can assign to users in our platform. You can kind of assign what level of auditing you see. So, maybe an analyst, you just see what the agent did, um, or what the agents did, what they saw, why they made the choices they did, et cetera. Whereas, for auditing purposes, for compliance frameworks, if you need to see further into the back end logic, you can make someone a higher permission or give someone a higher permission set. And, they could see the exact endpoints it reached out to get information, or the exact tools it used, what public resources on the internet it called out to get its threat
Yeah.
intel, things like
I
that.
feel like that's kind of the coolest part for me, just being able to see, where did you get this info? How did you make this decision, essentially? Because that kind of help you troubleshoot if it's making wrong decisions as well.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, you went here, you shouldn't have looked on this website to look for a CVE or something like that.
Yeah,
Cool.
because I know during the first stages of this, that was really important. You didn't want it to hallucinate,
Yeah.
just say flat out wrong information. And I know during the first phases of building it out, I would test from my house and trigger alerts myself, and so my IP was in that. And in the early stages, I had times where I would say this IP is malicious and associated with known threat groups. And I'm like, where are you getting this? And I later realized it was hallucinating, and so that made me realize we need to have a way to audit what the agent does.
Or
essentially.
it could have been your neighbor.
Yeah.
He's up to something. Yeah, so I'm curious, how scalable is this? Like, is it easy to just like plug and play into different places, or there's a lot of involvement from you or me or someone else in the engineering team to get it up and running?
Yeah. So as you know, our customer base, they're all using various different tool sets, different solutions, different IDPs. And so essentially most of the agents in the flow don't look at, one tool in particular. They investigate an alert in the broad sense. Whereas you have agents off to the side that pick up the alert depending on what tool it's coming from. So if you're ingesting a tool from one seam, you have a agent that initially takes in that information, determines, hey, this is from insert whatever seam you're using here, and says, okay, I need to consult my agent who's an expert in that tool.
Cool.
And so you can build one agent that's an expert in the tool, and it works with all the other agents who kind of just know seam tools at a high level.
Like, let's say we got a brand new customer, right? And we're like, okay, we got 7 of these applications they're using. We already have an agent for it. But let's say their 8th one, we don't. Is it a really hard process to kind of take a different application agent and make it for a new application, or?
Nope. So the agents realize they're in a flow, but they can also work independently. So, to equate it to a normal SOC, if me and you were in a SOC and all of a sudden you're out, I'm like, that's unfortunate. I have lost a pair of hands, but I can take things over from here. It's essentially the same way with the agentic flow. It's great the more you have, but if agents drop off or don't know how to handle things, the others can kind of pick up the slack.
Cool. So is there any, you mentioned a lot of features with this agent. Is there any roadmap features or, future plans that you see this thing going to?
Right now with the solution, it's very read only. It'll take in logs, investigate, determine how the alert should be escalated. Really the only action it'll take is contact someone. What we're hoping to have is, really a full tier 1, potentially getting into tier 2. So let's say we receive an alert that someone's logging in without MFA, obviously a security risk. Right now, it would, notify, determine that's a security risk. However, it'd be in the future, we hope to take it to an extra level to where that, an agent that has access to your IDP or access to your environment can go in, temporarily disable the account until MFA is applied, and maybe even one day apply that MFA.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I guess I would take that whole checks and balances into you got to be 100% sure if you're gonna let this thing take action on your environment, pretty much making code changes.
Yep.
So most of our environments, as we use Terraform infrastructure as code. Is the first step just to get it to make changes like in the console, or is it you thinking like Terraform changes?
Definitely console at first. And talking with others in the field, I think it's going to be a while before you get to where people are willing and trusting of AI to make decisions at that
Even
level.
like our Terraform's repo is insanely huge, so for it to have that knowledge on just our internal repo and then be able to find and fix whatever it needs to, I feel like is a big leap forward.
Yeah. Which you mentioned earlier about how do we audit what the agent does. I kind of think long term being able to audit is going to be the benefit that makes us use AI more, because let's say a tier 1 human analyst makes a mistake, we can just go back to that MFA alert for reference.
Mhm.
Let's say, someone had put in a ticket saying they were using a test account, testing, logging in without MFA.
Mhm.
That alert comes in, the agent disables the account while MFA or no MFA is a security risk. That was previously authorized
Mhm.
activity. Someone has submitted a ticket. Um, that was clearly a mistake on the human analyst part. But when you ask them, that's really all you can do is ask them why they disabled that account when it was ticketed. You can't go into their brain and pull out logs of
Mhm.
why they made that
But the AI
decision.
you can, because
Yep.
it gives you its brain
You'll
and a
see those
log. Yeah.
exact logs of what it did and why it did it. And then you can also implement, tight controls to make sure that doesn't happen again. To whereas, we're human. You tell
Mhm.
us not to do something, we might forget and do it again.
Yeah, that's true. So is there anything else you wanna tell us about your agent?
Um, I think going back, in the beginning we were discussing how threat actors are already using AI. Seen some, pretty crazy stuff. It's a crazy
Mhm.
time. Attack. I mean, it's the same attacks at heart,
Mhm.
but it's just at the scale you can do them, and it's also becoming easier. Just about anyone can pick up an LLM,
Mhm.
ask it how to do basic exploits, and be you know, a hacker in a day, so to speak.
Yep.
So we definitely have to do the same thing on our side. And so I think it's damaging to say, we can't trust AI at this level
Mhm.
because the longer we wait, the longer it's going to take to get it to
Yep.
state where we trust it.
Yep. So I'm saying if we don't use AI, we'll fall behind.
Absolutely.
So I can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yep.
For sure.
Cool. Thank you for joining us on Behind the Shield. I am Alex O'Hart, and this is Nicholas Whitley. As always, like and subscribe. Thank you.